Hi, I'm Bradley Bauer. And you're watching a student's perspective.
Hi, I'm Paige Bechtle, and you guys are watching Students Perspective. Today, I'm talking with Bradley Bowers, owner of Bradley Bowers Studio and designer. And so, thank you so much for joining here for this conversation. And everybody out there, if you like this conversation, feel free to like, share, and post questions in the comments. So, again, thank you so much for joining. We're excited to have this conversation because I feel like you're the perfect kind of bridge within our design community that offers a lot of interaction and conversation that can be useful to the students that we work with. And so I'm here at Marywood University in the interior architecture program. And I think the interior architecture and design program kind of offers a lot of different inlets, whether it be through furniture, some of the industrial design that is still a part of our program, but there's a lot to be had and talked about that considers every aspect of the design community. So, would you first like to introduce yourself just a little bit and about your background, Bradley?
Sure. My background is a little varied. There's a lot of different levels to it.
Mhm.
When I first started, before I even got to college, I was painting and drawing in high school. And that was kind of a pastime for me. It wasn't really something that I went into because I wanted to become a painter. It was really my counselors in high school were saying, hey, you need to take classes to get credits to graduate, etc. But then I found that I was kind of good at it and I really enjoyed doing it. And so I stuck with it, developed a portfolio, and then applied to the Savannah College of Art and Design with that painting portfolio and got accepted on a scholarship for the portfolio. And I was like, okay, maybe I actually do know how to do this stuff.
Right.
But when I got there, I immediately realized I knew nothing about any of the creative world. I knew painting, I knew sculpture, I knew fashion, and I knew architecture. But I didn't know jewelry design. I didn't know animation. I didn't know interior architecture. I didn't know so many different fields. And so I got hooked on putting my finger in every single one and kind of seeing, okay, what does it mean to be a graphic designer or an advertising designer?
Mhm.
So I think maybe an extra year because I graduated with my undergraduate degree in 5 years, and 1 year of that was me taking classes that had nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
But the requirements of my scholarship was just it didn't say I had to be following any. So I was like, all right, I'll try it. Um, so I did that, but eventually I did settle on industrial design because it allowed me to be a bit scatterbrained. Because industrial design, at least the curriculum I was taught under, you had to know graphic design, you had to know packaging, you had to know advertising, you needed to do contextual research. There were so many layers to it where I kind of never got bored. I always wanted to avoid a field or a career path where I would be doing the same thing every day. That would destroy me. So I did my undergraduate work and I did a few internships. Um, I worked for Gulfstream Aerospace. I worked for an eyewear company. I worked for Ralph Lauren. I worked for Procter and Gamble. As I'm thinking back now, I've worked for quite a few people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But well, it taught me that I didn't want to be a part of a corporate structure.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it started getting the thing in my mind of going solo. Um, So I graduated my undergrad, took some time off, tried to like realign myself, and then I realized I didn't know as much as I thought I needed to know to fly solo. So I applied to SCAD again to do my master's, but this time in furniture design. And it was really driven by Antonio La Rosa. He was the chair of the department, and we always got along while I was an undergraduate. And he was saying to me, "We do some really cool stuff over here. I think you would enjoy it." And so I was kind of like giving him the cold shoulder, like, "All right, whatever." Um, but he was right. And so anyway, so I spoke with him. He made it happen. I was accepted into the graduate program. And from there, it just everything changed. Um, I was kind of pulled into a world that I was always a spectator for, and now being considered part of it. So fast forward 2 years, I'm finishing up my thesis collection, and the opportunity to show that work in Milan in the 2012 Bologna comes up, which was just like otherworldly. But at the time, I didn't really know what it was. I just knew that it was a thing that happened in Europe and people talked about it. So I went to the work. Production blew my mind. I genuinely, I almost got like emotional while I was there because for so long I was thinking of myself as in the process of and never quite there yet. So to see people whose names I knew, like I knew these names. These weren't just people walking around the street. This is Paolo Antonelli. This is Marva Griffin. These are like big dogs seeing the work and going, "Oh, wow, hey, we like this." So that kind of that reaffirmed in my brain, okay, you can do this. You can do this yourself. You don't have to have another name backing you to feel qualified. So after that show, I moved to Miami, and just to make sure I wasn't making a huge mistake, I did take a job so that I could have some sort of income. And I was the senior designer or senior furniture designer for Adriana Oil. And so before I just punched myself in the head and said, "You're doing it again. You're tying yourself down, just jump."
Yep.
So I jumped. I founded my studio in Miami, and it has been it has been something. Again, there's so many layers to it. I won't go too far because I want this to be dialogue and not a monologue.
No, of course.
There was a lot. There was a
So
lot.
only 7 years ago, right? That you started the studio?
Well, legally, legally 7 years ago.
Mhm.
Prior to that, I think my first piece of furniture I made for someone was 2011. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, 2011, I think was the first piece someone paid me money to
mhm.
make a project that they were going to live with. Before that, I had sold paintings and things, but I'd
Right.
never made things. Was not going to sit on a pedestal and be stared at with a finger on your chin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk just a little bit about SCAD because you come from a really renowned school, and I know how appreciated SCAD is just internationally and across the country for like the reputable artists that come from it. I know they're very proud of your work in itself. What kind of homage would you say that SCAD has allowed you? And I know you said you dipped your toes in a handful of different classes, but what was it that kind of stuck out to you that made it so different and probably allowed you to see the diversity within the design field?
I think, and because I didn't go to any other university, I don't know if this is common all the way across the board. But
Right.
for me, what was amazing is kind of like the Hogwarts vibe of a place like that. It's like Hogwarts or like Xavier's School for the Gifted and X Men. It's kind of because when I arrived, I was the weirdo from high school. And
Mhm.
so I was always on the margin. I was the kid that got picked on. And so when I got to SCAD, it was just a bunch of us. and,
It's
so,
really cool.
and so nobody, I mean, there was only camaraderie. You were just surrounded by other. It's like that scene where Hagrid's like, "You're a wizard." It's like but you need to be surrounded by other wizards so you get it. And they don't feel so odd or so out of place. So for me, that's really what SCAD was. It was an opportunity to be amongst other weirdos and know that it's okay. Like, all right, you can spread your wings a little bit, try some new things out. It's all right. Other people are doing it. So there was that, and then there was also the Hogwarts aspect with the professor. One of the things I loved the most in the Harry Potter books was that each professor was an expert in something. And so when I had I had a jewelry professor, Bonnie Kubasta, and Jay Song, and PJ Chen. They were three jewelry professors, and they could genuinely make anything out of a flat piece of silver or gold. It was ridiculous. And they were showing us how to do it. Jesus Rojas, who could sculpt and paint just about anything. And then I had a professor, uh, Bob Fee, who, and I love this about him, he was the drawing professor. He would sit at his table at the front of the room and draw. But because it was ideal to draw on like a flat surface, obviously you can't see that in the back of the room. So he would set a mirror above him and angle it so that the people in the back could see the surface. But because it was in the mirror, he had to draw backward so that I'm
Yeah.
like, who are you? So that was like magical to me. So being dropped into that environment, oh my gosh, that's something I keep struggling to recreate in my, oh yeah, I live next to a train. So there's just
Okay,
that.
the lamp. That's cool.
So yeah, that's part of the ambiance of New Orleans.
Mhm.
Uh, we'll see. We'll see. Let's see.
Oh, hear it. There you go.
So yeah, so for me, it was really about trying to kind of find my own weirdness, but being allowed to do that. I think that was what was important. And as a solo studio, I still try to recreate that type of creative environment.
No, I think that's such an important aspect. I mean, you come to a place where you're aiming to be creative as possible and to innovate and to be able to talk to individuals that share those similar interests to you and can only influence you to learn more and grow and do more, really. They inspire you to create something more than what you would have previously. And so that interaction and collaboration is so crucial. And I think we experience that just as much probably at our university as well. And just the interaction with people who actually share some of the strongest interests and a lot of these different passions, and then being able to communicate with them on a daily basis, it does something so similarly. And of course, the professors that we can look up to on a daily basis, I think we can all relate to that. I mean, there's always going to be someone within a specific field that you feel you can trust with to be able to share their knowledge with you. And that's kind of part of, well, it's entirely the reason that we've created this web series is to be able to show people, the intricate aspects of our design industry and the things that you can learn, even with a degree that might not seem like it's under that realm. But interior architecture for us is under the entire design realm. And there's graphics, there's branding, there's industrial, there's furniture, there's so many intricacies that aren't necessarily talked about, but should be. So that's part of why we do what we do. But I know you come together with a lot of different passions and abilities to create within your studio. And it's like you hold this umbrella of abilities, whether it be textiles or lighting or furniture, or all these possibilities that deal with physical installations that interact with architecture. Where did where did it declare for you that all these fields would meet into one? Did you know that you wanted to find a niche, or did you just all of a sudden realize that you can do almost anything you want to?
Hey guys, I'm Brittany Rayner watching Savannah Now Live. I am standing here with Mr. Bradley.
Hello.
We are participating in SCAD Fashion Week, which is amazing. And Mr. Bradley, you are a 2010 and 2012 SCAD alum, is that correct?
Yes, industrial design and furniture design.
Amazing. So tell me what we're looking at here.
So what we're seeing is a collection of jewelry that I designed, and when I did industrial design at SCAD, you had to take classes in neighboring fields because you had to have a kind of well-rounded understanding of design. And I took a few jewelry courses and got addicted to it.
All right.
And so even after graduating, I've kind of kept with that line of work. So these pieces here are a part of a collection called Chrysalis. And the idea is to create pieces that are somewhere between jewelry and armor and personal expression. So all of the pieces kind of fit in interesting ways. Like this piece goes over a fingernail to kind of create a cage around it.
Awesome.
But I'm trying to think of new ways to do jewelry where people can get something more exciting. And then with the scarves, I started playing with color patterns and applications that you can't achieve without certain technology.
Okay.
So these are using 3D printing but with color printing. So I can do color gradients that you can't do by hand. I can use materials that aren't conducive towards being handmade all the time. So it's really kind of bringing the technology of industrial design into the fashion world.
That's amazing. So,
Thank you.
if you wanted to walk me through, what would you say would be your favorite piece out there? Because I'm liking a lot
This
right
is
now.
where it started. It all started with this piece here. This is like a finger cage or cuff. And
Okay.
so I first designed this, and that's kind of where the armor part came in. And then it kind of took off from there. So this, I would have to say, is the mother of all of it. And then shortly after, everything else kind of fell into place. But it all started there.
Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate that. In the very beginning, I think it started just from going to SCAD and having opportunities in front of me. And when I was at SCAD, I saw it just as a tool for creative art.
Yeah.
So to me, none of them were different from each other in the sense of if you do this, you can't do that. They were all creative art. And if I was at a creative art school, then I must be a creative artist. So I should be able to do all the creative art.
Yeah.
When I started flying solo, though, it honestly was not intentional. It was just I would get an idea and then I would think to myself, okay, for this idea to make sense, what's the best way to execute it? And it might be to 3D print it, or it might be to screen print it, or it might be to make a collection of jewelry. So for me, I never wanted the idea to suffer because I didn't know how to do it personally. So either I would find someone who knew how to do it, and I'll tell you about how that never worked. But find someone who knew how to do it, or I would just sit down and figure out how to do it myself. And the reason that never worked is I've learned that people in certain manufacturing industries, they've been told, here's how you do it. And anything that steps to the left or to the right or top or bottom of that immediately is a, "Ooh, I don't know." And so I got tired of those conversations. And so I said, okay, how hard can it be? And honestly, it's very hard. It's really hard. But I still decide I'm going to doggedly pursue it, or I'm going to find those types of manufacturers who are excited by challenges as opposed to turned off by them. So yeah, I don't look at it like a multifaceted. I just get an idea and I go, well, this is a chair, and this would be a stupid chair if I made it out of wood. It needs to be made out of metal. All right, here we go. Let's figure it out. So that's kind of how I approach it. Not to, I don't set out to say this year, let's do 5 different things from 5 different genres. It's like, no, let's just think of stuff.
I agree that there's a long and tired process that needs to be retired or challenged constantly, and that's kind of part of the design field is continuing to innovate and reutilize the things that we already know, but look past them because there's a series of whether it be furniture companies explicitly, but so used to this process and think that it's worked for so long, but our environment, our culture, our society is constantly changing, and we see that every day. So to not embrace those changes and kind of offer some new perspective is just would be a failure not to. So I applaud you for that and encourage to never stop that sort of light that you have there. But I want to ask a little bit about the technology that you also just kind of considered. So I know you strive on the highest sort of technology in order to operate or create some of the, whether it be pieces or structural elements that exist within some of your designs. What has that been like? And have you always known how to use some of those facets of technology, or has it been a learning process throughout?
It's been a little bit of both. That professor I mentioned earlier, Jesus Rojas, he was also my 3D modeling professor.
Mm.
And I learned first Rhino,
Mhm.
then I learned modeling software. I don't even know if you guys even know of it, called Alias. And then after Alias, yeah, I was like, you guys don't even know this. After Alias, um, SolidWorks. And I don't know if it was because I learned Rhino first that it was just embedded in my mind. And it actually suited my needs really well because Rhino is almost a program where you sketch 3 dimensionally.
Yeah.
And it was similar, but it was so specific to the automotive industry that it almost fought itself on being able to cross over with different file types.
Mhm.
SolidWorks, oh my God, That is, I hate that. If I could burn down the factory that creates, oh my, it's the worst. It's, but it's not good for me. Like my work is always super curvilinear. Like I'm looking at, this is like one of the shapes I'm working on right now. Like
Right.
how do I make this in solid? Like how do I make a hollow object that, I don't know.
Right.
So, but if I'm playing in Rhino, I can kind of explore that a bit more. And then they introduced Grasshopper. And Grasshopper, think I started learning that in maybe 2000, 2010, I think 10 or 11, I started learning Grasshopper, but it was just surface level. Ever since then, I can't think, there hasn't been, outside of me being away from my computer, there's not a day that I'm not working on Grasshopper, either watching tutorials or doing something anyway or pushing an idea. So it's always there. But for manufacturing technology, in a way, contemporary manufacturing technology is what enabled me to do so many different things. Because now I don't have to call a fabric mill in India and then call silk screener in China and then try to get them to ship things to each other. There are companies online that do that for you so long as you know how to make the file and send it to them properly formatted. And then they'll send you a sample and you go back and forth. So I've cut out the middleman. Or you have companies like Shapeways or Geometry, which do 3D printing, which that object that was just holding up is CJP printed. As long as you have the file type, you can get it made. And it's 3D printed, the price fluctuation isn't really based off how many you need. If you need one, it's the same. If you need 200, same price. Um, so it's almost put um, responsibility back on the individual designer, where you don't have to have $200,000 to come up with a product, a flower vase like you would have to do in the past. You would need a lot of money to pay someone to make mold, to do a run of 10,000 and do that. You don't need to, and I don't want to. So that's the
Yeah, there's less reliance on other people, which is really nice to hear. You can, I mean, there's so much creative outlets or options for you too now, but it's also good to hear. So we kind of live, breathe, sleep Rhino in Marywood, at least within our university. And it's something that sometimes when you go to the field or you're looking for an internship, people look at you like you have five heads because they don't even know the program. But it's because we kind of encourage the process, almost of a Bauhaus kind of design school, to where we like to innovate as much as possible and create solutions that are unique and retrofit any given scenario. And so you can't do that through programs like Revit or architectural programs that kind of prefabricate elements already for you, because really there's no design that goes into some of the prefabricated elements that you're constantly dealing with. And sometimes it's maybe beyond the realism, but there's really so much to learn about the design process when it goes into being able to freehand and consider things at a stage where you can really design anything you'd like to. So that's reassuring to hear that someone else understands our language a little bit more.
Well, the problem is, I feel like I'm, hopefully within the next 5 years, I won't be so much of an island. But right now, I am a bit of an island in that I've talked to other studios or I've gone to go see other studios. And if it's not a massive architecture firm,
Yeah.
they are using programs from 10, 12 years ago, and they're using them very elementary, which it shows in the work. You see that in the output. If it's not Zaha Hadid or Bjarke or Frank Gehry's studio or Morphosis, you start thinking what's happening with the rest of the world. And they really, it's a political issue of, we hired this guy, he knows how to use this, so that's what we use now. And until we hire someone who knows how to use another program and then can teach all of us, we're gonna keep using it.
Right.
So yeah, for me, flexibility is key. That's the only way I think small studios can stay alive. I have to be able to adapt. I have to know Keyshot. I have to know Cinema 4D. I have to know, trying to think of someone just sent me a new thing where it's like fiber or fabric studies. And she's like, you need to learn this. I'm like, okay, I'll carve out some time to figure it out.
Yeah.
So you've got to stay nimble.
So rendering processes, that's huge and part of your design as well. How is that like working with that in-house?
Oh wait, there's that train again. They literally they do this to me on purpose. I swear they sync it up. What was the question?
rendering processes. And so, like you already mentioned, Keyshot and things like that. How is that in house when you deal with those situations and replicating such dynamic materials?
It's not easy at all. And Keyshot is a program that I learned right around, I think the year it came out, we started learning it. So it's something that's been with me for almost a decade as well, maybe a little bit longer than a decade, honestly. So every version of it I've kind of lived with and played with and explored, and still learning stuff about it. But what I what I learned or why I use Keyshot, I learned from architecture firms because I saw massive projects getting funded hundreds of millions of dollars to build these things. And they got funded off of a couple of 3D prints and some posters or some presentation boards. And I thought to myself, why am I trying to make every idea I have to pitch it to someone or sell it to someone? If architects can get away with selling renders, so can I. So that was my approach. My approach was to say, let's render it, see if people like it, and if they like it, then we'll take some orders and we'll make it. So my process, I mean, and everyone always asks, do I do all of it? I do the modeling, I do the rendering, I do the Photoshop editing afterwards, I do the graphics. It's literally, I literally go crazy trying to implement all of this stuff. But if you want it to look right, you kind of have to be able to wear all of those hats, but wear them effectively. I think that's the big thing is if if I weren't good at modeling or rendering, I wouldn't do it. I'd ask somebody else to do it. But because I've asked other people to do it before and they did horrible job, I'm like, no, I think I'll take the time to learn.
Mhm. Yeah, you've become a master of all trades to your own niche, which I think is so great. So do you work with other people within your company? Are there other people behind the scenes that, because I'm
You
not
meant
sure about
behind,
your company. What's that?
I thought you meant behind me, and I was like,
Oh,
no,
not physically, not physically, just behind the scenes.
I do. There's and I do it again. I base a lot of it off architecture firms, or at least architecture firms of old, where and I read a lot of biographies and a lot of studio biographies. And one that I really enjoyed is Frank Gehry's studio. In his early years, he spoke about how his studio would expand and contract based off project. If we get a huge stadium, we hire 40 more people. After that project's over, we fire those 40 people. And then we keep fluctuating this way so that they're never trying to uh, chase more just to stay afloat. So that's the same model I use. Um, I can't think of a week where I'm not either on the phone or chatting with another, and it usually is another SCAD alum, but another person who is an expert in some other field, and we collaborate on something. And so I've just finished a project in Atlanta where I was collaborating with Pablo Henico. He's a lighting artist and designer from Colombia, but we went to SCAD together. And so he'll call me if he needs something. I'll call him if he needs something. And that's how I'm kind of structuring things. Where when I was in Miami and first founded the studio, there was always three or four other people just sitting around looking at each other. And to me, that it's not that that wasn't productive, but that only satisfied to have friends near you, whatever. So now for me, it's not necessarily about having warm bodies in front of me, but being able to email someone some schematics and say, hey, can you do this and how much will it cost?
Mhm.
It's kind of on as needed kind of basis.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that's very similar to Frank Gehry. I mean, like, similar to the way that you address certain project studios. So there's a specific team for specific projects, and that kind of allows you to find their niches, like I've already said, and kind of their strengths and make it according to each project. So kind of just allows people to actually have a benefit where they're needed and
Right.
feel like their worth is valued there, which I think is really important. So there's a few topics that I'd still like to touch on. So we still have a little bit of time left, at least 10 or so minutes. But the first thing, I want to focus on some of the specific projects that you offer. And I've seen just a handful through your website and just some of your collections in the past. But maybe what's your favorite or something you'd love to dive into, whether it be lighting or whether it be even the wallpaper or textiles. I would love to hear some of the thought process behind one of those.
Okay, I'll give you a thought process. I don't have any favorite
I,
because it's stressful.
that,
So Um, I'll do the wallpaper because that one's been probably the most recent.
Yeah.
Um, my thinking there was again strategic, which is something that you have to be. You have to be nimble and strategic if you're a smaller studio. But what I was thinking was, how can I create something where I don't always have to be sitting at a desk hammering away or sculpting or structuring or physically involved? And so my idea was, well, everyone needs wallpaper. At least architecture firms, interior designers are always sourcing it, and it's always very boring. And I think I could do better. So let's explore. And so a good friend of mine, Jordan Graves, she's a PhD at Georgia Tech. Um, she's in robotics, and we've always like geeked out over code and Grasshopper and robotics. And she was doing some work with Moire effect. And I've always loved that kind of super simple graphic language that has a really interesting quality to it. But I said, oh, what if I could make this like a pattern that wasn't overbearing and it didn't make you get a headache, but it kind of activated your wall space a little bit more.
Mhm.
And so I think maybe for the better part of 2.5 months, maybe three, I was chained to my computer, putting together Grasshopper scripts. That's the other thing. I write all the scripts. I write all the algorithms because I need them to do a certain thing. And then the collection. I think I did 4 collections under that family, and then again harnessing contemporary technology, I found a wallpaper manufacturer based out of Detroit, and I hit and I said, "Hey, how do people work with you to make wallpaper?" And they said, "Oh, all you have to do is send us a file. It has to be formatted this way and that, and then we can print out samples and send it to you. And then as people order it, we'll just make it." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you." But finally, it became I had to know their language so that I wasn't sending them stuff that wouldn't work, and then they get frustrated and decide we don't want to work with small people anymore. Go away. Um, so that collection or that family of collections, that was really about me exploring graphic language, overlays, and how those overlays and those blends can start to create optical illusions. Because when one of them I looked at is based off Mandarin oranges, and my idea there was how can you because Home Depot sells a really beautiful wallpaper that's it's absolutely gorgeous, but it's Home Depot. And it
Yeah.
was just oranges and green leaves. And I'm like, what can I do with that to abstract that away, put it into this world of science and optical illusion without it feeling like that? Like I didn't want it to feel like as much as I love Zaha, I don't want it to feel like you're walking into a space age gallery and you can't it
Yeah.
should still feel good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of that collection. Um, the jewelry, I love the jewelry. That
Mhm.
was one of my favorite things to do. Actually, that might be my favorite.
Yeah.
Just literally engages the body. You can't not feel it. Um, and it also kind of transforms the wearer. Every time a lady or a guy puts it on, they change a little bit because it's not standard green. It becomes a bit more of a cage. And so that was fun. And photo shoot, again, I don't know if you can hear that train. I think people are going to think I'm crazy if I keep bringing up the train.
No, no, it's okay. Yeah, you can still hear the hum. We can cut it if we need to. It's hilarious.
But yeah, with the photo shoot for that, it was me and Pablo Serrano, who also went to SCAD. He lives in New York. He's a phenomenal photographer. And we got together. I showed him the jewelry and I said, I don't know why, but I want it to be like a skin tight blue hand that's like holding these forms and the hand is doing these weird gestures, almost like ballet or something.
Yeah.
And it ended up having to be me as the hand model because nobody was doing it right. Everyone was trying to be cute
Yeah,
with
I
it.
mean,
And I'm like, no, don't be cute. Be weird. It should feel alien. Um, and so I sewed the glove. Everything is so hand on. And then I don't know if you've seen the photos of it, but the production value of it, I show it to people and they're like, oh, this is great. So maybe I'll send you some imagery of that. But
love to.
it was something that again, and that was through a jewelry company that just needs the 3D file. And they go, we'll print and wax, and then we'll do a lost wax casting. Um, which they have to do anyway. I'm not asking them to invent a new process. That's how they make standard engagement rings. So I'm just saying, instead of using that geometry, can you use my geometry? And they're like, yeah.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, I mean, if I were to preach any philosophy, it's how do you bring their knowledge to your will?
Mhm.
They already know how to do something and they're already used to a process. Your creativity has to extend beyond coming up with ideas. It also has to extend to manipulating a system to get what you need. Can you be creative in that way?
So you just said design philosophy too, and I think I've gathered yours just from not only your works but from your conversation as well. But there was one quote that stuck out to me that was already on your website. But I like to ask people their design philosophy in general. I just think it's a interesting topic to cover. But you said something about between the possible and the sublime. Could you just define kind of what that means to you, or where that's kind of evolved from?
It
It's a
to
loaded,
me, what was that?
it's a loaded question a little bit.
Yeah, it is. It's but that's okay. That's okay. Between the possible and the sublime, for me, it the possible is kind of what people expect. When you say the word chair, or when you say flower vase, or when you say earring, people have an image almost immediately. It's when you work with children and you say draw a house, they draw something. You say draw a chair, they draw something. And a little bit of a tangent, I did a project in Savannah with a local boys and girls kind of after school program. And it was automatic drawing, is what I call it. But the surrealists would do it where they close their eyes and draw on a sheet of paper, open them and see if they got it right. And so I did that with kids where I was like, draw a bed. And so they would draw a bed with their eyes closed. And obviously, it never looked like a bed. But my point to them was that is a bed. It is. And you got to let go of this notion that you know how everything is going to be, how it's going to turn out. So for me, that's the sublime. The sublime is that moment where there's some uneasiness. It's not quite, can I believe that that's what this thing is? And if I do a chair, I don't want anyone to walk into a room with one of my chairs and go, oh, yeah, duh, obviously, I get it. I want there to be some tension. I want there to be a bit of anxiety until the moment you sit down and you go, oh, oh, yeah, no, it is. Okay. Don't worry, everybody. It's a chair. That kind of, um, with the jewelry as well. And I don't want it, I want it to lay on a table and I want someone to tell you that's a ring. And I want you to want to hit that person for lying. That's how much so that's what I mean by in between those two worlds. Um, my philosophy though is pretty simple. I think it's simple. Every day we walk through a world that's applied to us. No one gets to pick what Zaha's tower in Miami is going to look like. They can tell her if they don't like it, but they're not in the design room when they're thinking of it. No one gets to pick what Main Street looks like. We get that's forced upon us. But inside our home, that's where we reign supreme. And for me, I think it's an incredible honor to be able to design something that a person chooses to live with and chooses to engage. So I take it, me, that's kind of my philosophy is to approach everything with that respect because this is going to live with someone and I can maybe only get it 80% there. The rest of it is up to them. And I've just finished some interior projects. One of them just opened in New York. And it's weird for me because when I go visit, they're completely doing things in there that I would not do. And I'm kind of like, but it's a public space. So I just have to recognize I present it, then they take it. So, but I think it's for me, that's an incredible compliment that people feel comfortable to start to bend and push and move it. I don't want people to restrict it like they have to, like they're in church. Don't touch anything, look straight ahead and smile.
Right.
I get a little loose with it. So I don't know if that is a philosophy. Maybe that's just a thought process or a state of mind, you know.
Well, I mean, I absolutely think it is. I think also personality in general is so important to what we do because we're constantly designing for others and to not only respect their kind of intimate situations or just the respect that they have for certain things within their environments, but it's creating something that's entirely personal to them and unique to their considerations. And that's why I even find your conversations about, tangible objects and the ones we hold or wear, like they become so specific because not only are they ergonomic, but they tell a story too. And I think all of your design work does that, which is incredible. And so kind of talking about challenging a lot of, I know, keep confident. How could you not though? But so some of your design products that we already talked about, whether it be challenging your preconceived notion of a chair, things like that. I think you were able to do that entirely through Ellen's Design Challenge. So what was
Thank
it like for you?
That was an otherworldly experience, mostly because of when it occurred. Um, that occurred right after I left Miami. And so I was in a weird space of what do I do now? Do I
Yeah,
continue this? Because the studio in Miami was 100% design built.
yeah,
And then I was like, this is tiring. I'm constantly in a rolling barrel of 6 months of building, then I need to find a new client, and then I'm still finishing the build and then doing it. And it was never ending. And so I got the phone call, which was very cryptic and very like hush hush. And they were saying, would you be interested in doing this thing? I can't tell you what it is, but we'll do some interviews. And if they like you, blah, blah, blah. So I was doing a lot of this, a lot of Skype. Uh, but I was doing it with no idea what they were looking for. Right?
yeah.
Or not even what it was. I didn't even know it was a TV show. They were
Oh,
just asking questions about design.
mhm.
And then one day before my birthday, I got a phone call, and it was Ellen on the phone saying, hey, we would love to have you. Can you fly in tomorrow?
Wow.
And well, I can do that. So,
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
well, my first thing was if you guys are buying the plane ticket, I can definitely fly in tomorrow. I'm not buying. And
Mm,
so they flew me in, I landed, and then kind of the scope of it hit me. Actually, I don't even think it ever really did hit me until maybe a month after the whole thing ended. Um, but that show, the same way Italy, that show in Milan taught me that I was no longer a spectator, but now I was on the inside of that invisible wall or that barrier. The Ellen show taught me to trust myself and
yeah,
trust that I knew what I was doing because they didn't give us a lot of time to come up with things. And so there was no space for second guessing. There was no space for doubt. And prior to that, and a little bit to today, I'm going to have to remember that, Bradley, from those years ago. I still doubt and second guess a bit, which I think is healthy. But at the same time, it's also, you've been doing this for a long time now. Trust.
yeah.
So that's what I gained from that. And they treated me wonderfully. They treated everybody wonderfully. So that was really nice. But yeah, it was a moment that I think I needed where I think wise I needed to learn how to just believe what I'm saying, believe it myself, because
Yeah.
other people didn't believe it. I was the one asking for a redo. They were like, no, 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 we agreed. We stop.
I mean, it's all part of the affirmation process, and you definitely deserve that in itself. We've been trying to get Ellen featured on our show for a long time now. We tag her and everything, so you might be our in at some point. Tag her
Well, they
so too.
remember.
No, she has to, of course. But so I guess we'd like to close off. I'm kind of running out of time here, but two. But so I think I want to end with if you could give yourself, probably back to my shoes, maybe basically within your college years, any one piece of advice, what would that be?
I always, anyone who knows me knows that I take a long time to get to a point. So um, there's a passage in Lord of the Rings. I forget what book it is, but someone's talking to an elf, and the elf tells them the reason they don't give advice. And they said the reason we don't give advice is because sometimes people follow it. And I love that because it's the truth. I don't know if it's a piece of advice, but I will say that your wildest expectation isn't even close. It's not even close to what will actually happen, but to be ready. I think that's probably and I think I was ready in a way. I don't think I was fully ready. When Italy hit, I wasn't prepared to take all of that on because I didn't even know all of that existed. But be ready. I would say have a good strong pair of boots laced up and a go bag, kind of like an apocalypse zombie movie. Have a go bag next to the door, always ready for you, because who knows when it's coming. Um, Sometimes it's from something you did, and sometimes it's kind of like you all reaching out to me. I never in a million years would have imagined that people at a university in Pennsylvania were uh, seeing anything I was doing. So
Right.
it's kind of it's I guess you kind of have to just be prepared to be able to turn in any direction, because who knows where it'll come from. And I hate the thing of follow your passion. I don't think that's what it is, but be prepared to hate it and continue anyway. There are plenty of days that I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And sit around and eat chips and watch Netflix. And then 3 days later, it subsides and I'm back in it again. And I'm like, all right, let's roll again. So I guess that's the advice. Be prepared, have your go bag full of your design skills and your sensibilities, and then have a, I guess, have a release. Have a something you can turn to when you hate this, because you're going to hate it.
Yeah.
Turn here and just fall in love with this thing, and then you'll start missing that again. But if it's only this, if this is all you have, you'll go mad.
I mean, I think that speaks to the flexibility. But yeah, but the
Oh,
no, but there's so much. But the flexibility and the chances of adapting to every situation too, it's something that you've followed your entire career. And I think to constantly be prepared for that evolution is something that's always important in the design field. And you're right, there are days where even within school, maybe all of school, that we sometimes feel discouraged, or maybe that it's not the path, but there's always another path to be found. And really, I feel like that is the message we try to get to our viewers as well. So, I mean, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. And of course, there's a lot more than you would imagine that are all aware of your work, more than you would expect. So we're trying to convey that to our viewers as well, and as much of the student bodies that we can, to understand kind of the paths that they can take beyond this. So that's the end of this episode today. But tune us in next week for another episode from a student's perspective. So thank you again, Bradley.
thank you guys for having me.